Alright guys, so for the last step of drawing in our names in 1-point perspective, we are going to be cutting off the back of our letters so that way they don't go on and on and on forever into infinity. We are going to essentially take whatever is happening on the front plane and mimic it by creating a back plane or an end to it. So the first step was creating the front face. The second step was diminishing lines going to the vanishing point. And now we're going to give a back edge for our third step. So I'm going to start by deciding, based on the base or the bottom of each of my letters, how far back do I want my letters to diminish. So I'm going to find a nice horizontal line, and I'm going to cut off the back of each letter all the same. So wherever there's a front horizontal, I will have a matching back horizontal. So there's my J, E. Letters like N's will have two little sections because they have two base portions there. And the same thing with my A there. So that's giving the same exact depth to each of my letters. Now what we can do is we're going to go through and from the bottom up continue cutting off the back. So remember my rule, whatever happens at the front, you have to have the same exact type of line at the back. So if it's horizontal, you'll have a horizontal. When it hits the corner and it moves up vertical, you will have to change and make your back corner move up vertical as well. When the front changes direction again, horizontal to vertical, you will do the same thing. One thing that a lot of people get confused on is they'll try to take a top-down approach, but really we have to follow logically from the bottom, since that's where we've trimmed everything off with to start. If I then come up here and try to guess, the likelihood of those things matching up are not very good. And then you can erase those diminishing lines out past your block letter. Now, there will be some tricky parts, and each of your letters will be a little bit different. But sometimes you will see parts of your letter, like this crossbar section of the J, where we can't tell where to cut off this side. We know about this side because we can follow those corners because we can see it all the way from the bottom. But we don't know here. So sometimes we have to use a little bit of logic to figure this out. So if I know logically that the front edge here lines up horizontally with the front edge here, if I know where this back edge is, I should be able to then translate that over to the other side and take the back edge and line up this back edge with it. Now that's very small, but that's very, very important to make sure both sides of that J have the same depth and that that's consistent. Now I'll come across and I'll use some of that same logic with my letter E. Notice the sides on this letter, we have three little legs for the E, so we'll have three side panels here. Those are really close to being directly above our vanishing point, so notice they're going to be very, very foreshortened compared to the J, which is much further out to the side from our vanishing point. So I'm going to take the bottom corner, horizontal, matches the horizontal, and then it turns and goes up vertically. So I'm going to match that, find a nice vertical. And since all three of those legs are cut off at the same on the same vertical line, that will tell me I can cut off all three of those lines with the same vertical line at the back as well. And that's a little bit hard to see just because of the perspective. They're very foreshortened. But knowing that all three of those line up helps me figure out where all three of those go. And then when the front line comes down for each leg, it then turns and goes over horizontally. So the back line will come down and go over horizontally there. And I'll only see a little smidge bit because the rest of that will disappear. Behind the middle leg of the E. So this one also vertical into horizontal, vertical into horizontal. And that's all that I will see of that E in 1 point perspective. Now when I move over for my letter N, since this leg is directly over top of my vanishing point, I will not see the left or the right side of it. I'll only see sort of the front face and the bottom. So I'm going to move ahead and come over here. At the front of the letter N, this time it's horizontal into a diagonal. So at the back, I have my horizontal, but to cut it off, I will have to take a matching angle, totally parallel, and slide it back to cut off that N, like that. Section there. Now up here, this top portion, I'm not sure if we would see that get cut off somewhere. So again, I'm going to use a little bit of mathematical sort of logic to try to figure that out. If I know that this front leg is vertically aligned with this very bottom corner, I should then be able to say that this bottom corner would be aligned vertically with that back edge. And the way that that hits, let me double check, vertically straight up from there, only a sliver of that section will be trimmed off. But that shows me how far back this side of the N should go. Now as I move over to my next letter, another N, I have a horizontal and a vertical. So I'm going to take the horizontal and the matching vertical and go up. And redraw anything along the way that I accidentally erase. And then the same thing on this side, but horizontal and diagonal, horizontal and parallel, matching, diagonal. A lot of times people will like let this get very crooked or tilted in a different direction, but it has to stay perfectly parallel to there. Now the same thing is going to follow for if we can see any of the back of this one. We know that the front edge matches this corner. So if we know where the back corner is, that can tell us if we'd see any of the back edge back there. But in this particular time it runs behind the N, so that's okay for this one to continue back behind. Now last but not least, the A. This one has several angles. The front edge has a horizontal and an angle, so the back edge will have horizontal and a parallel angle. And then over here on the other side, horizontal, angled, horizontal. So the back will go the same direction. Horizontal, angled, and then a little tiny bit of a horizontal there. So that matching angle, keeping it parallel. Then when it hits that corner, I'm going to just barely see back edge matching that front edge there. Now when you get finished, go back and look and see if anything looks strange. Sometimes it's very easy to miss a portion. If you have holes inside of like your letters like an A or a P or a D, do make sure that those corners, you'll have to find a creative way like this or like this to figure out how to match something up if we don't have all the information. And that is the very tricky part, and I'm there to help you if you need help with that in class. But once you're finished, you're going to erase everything extra, leaving only your letters, no extra diminishing lines. And then I suggest it would help you to make everything pop before we color it, to take your ruler and go back over your lines now that we know exactly what you need, and darken everything for the next step. That's going to give it really nice craftsmanship. That's going to make things really stand out. But just go right back in with your ruler, and you can already see the difference that makes in the quality. I like to draw light until I know it's right. If you press that hard and go that dark right when you first start, you'll never get the extra lines erased. But now that I know what everything needs to look like, having it nice and bold will make it look nice from a distance. Like that. So, once you do all of your letters, you will then be ready for the coloring part.